On April 19, 2002, police broke down the door of a Seattle apartment and found Layne Staley's body sitting on his couch in front of a TV that was still playing. He had been dead for 2 weeks. His body weighed 86 pounds. Needles were scattered around him. The apartment was locked from the inside. Nobody had checked on him. Nobody had called. The man who once had one of the most powerful voices in rock history had died completely alone, and the world didn't even notice he was gone. If you want to hear more tragic stories from rock history, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we're diving deep into the stories nobody talks about. Layne Staley wasn't supposed to end up like this. In the early 90s, he was on top of the world. Alice in Chains was one of the biggest bands in the grunge movement, selling millions of albums, touring with everyone from Metallica to Van Halen. And Layne's voice was the kind of voice that gave you chills. That haunting, tortured wail on songs like Man in the Box and Wood made him a legend. He could scream like a demon and sing like an angel in the same breath. People compared him to the greatest rock vocalists of all time. But behind that voice was a man who was falling apart. And by the mid-90s, everyone could see it. The problem started early. Layne got introduced to heroin in the late 80s. And by the time Alice in Chains got famous, he was already hooked. At first, he could hide it. He'd show up to recording sessions. He'd perform on stage. He'd do interviews. But as the years went on, the drug took over everything. His bandmates watched him disappear in front of their eyes. They tried interventions. They tried tough love. They tried everything. Nothing worked. Layne didn't want to be saved. He wanted to be left alone. By 1996, Alice in Chains was barely functioning. They recorded one more album, a self-titled record that fans and critics loved, but Layne could barely get through it. He'd show up to the studio late, high, or not at all. His voice was still incredible, but you could hear the pain in every note. The band tried to tour, but Layne couldn't handle it. He'd miss shows. He'd walk off stage mid-performance. He'd lock himself in hotel rooms for days. Finally, in 1996, the band played their last show together. Layne walked off stage and never came back. After that, Layne just vanished. He stopped answering calls. He stopped seeing friends. He locked himself in his apartment in Seattle's University District and refused to come out. The few people who did see him said he looked like a ghost. His teeth were rotting out of his head. His skin was pale and covered in sores. He'd lost so much weight that his clothes hung off his body like sheets. One friend said it was like talking to a corpse. Layne knew what was happening to him, but he didn't care. He told people he was already dead inside. The last person to see Layne alive was his former fiancée, Demery Parrott's mother. She stopped by his apartment in early April 2002 to check on him. When she saw him, she couldn't believe what she was looking at. Layne was skeletal. His arms were covered in track marks. He could barely stand. She begged him to go to the hospital, but he refused. He told her he was fine, even though it was obvious he wasn't. She left, and that was the last time anyone saw him breathing. 2 weeks later, on April 19th, Layne's accountant realized something was wrong. Layne hadn't been withdrawing money from his bank account, which was unusual because he always needed cash for drugs. The accountant called the police and asked them to do a welfare check. When the police arrived at the apartment, nobody answered the door. They knocked, they called out, nothing. Finally, they broke the door down. What they found inside was devastating. Layne's body was sitting on the couch, facing the TV, which was still on. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. Needles and drug paraphernalia were scattered around the apartment. The coroner later determined that he'd been dead since April 5th, exactly 8 years to the day after Kurt Cobain killed himself. The coincidence sent chills through the rock world. Layne had always said he didn't want to end up like Kurt, but in the end he died on the same day, alone and forgotten. The autopsy revealed just how bad things had gotten. Layne's body weighed only 86 pounds. For a man who was 6 feet tall, that's almost skeletal. His organs were shutting down. His heart was barely functioning. The official cause of death was a speedball, a mixture of heroin and cocaine. But really, Layne had been dying for years. His body just finally gave up. What makes Layne's death even more tragic is that nobody noticed he was gone. For 2 weeks his body sat in that apartment, and not a single person checked on him. No friends, no family, no bandmates. Everyone had given up on him because he'd pushed them all away. Layne had isolated himself so completely that when he finally died, the world just kept spinning without him. It wasn't until his accountant noticed the missing money that anyone even thought to look for him. When the news broke, the rock community was devastated. Jerry Cantrell, Alice in Chains guitarist and Layne's closest friend, said he'd been expecting it for years, but it still destroyed him. Other musicians like Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell talked about how much they loved Layne and how helpless they felt watching him fade away. Fans around the world mourned the loss of one of the greatest voices in rock history. But the thing that haunted everyone was the same question. How did we let this happen? How did Layne Staley die alone in his apartment and nobody noticed for 2 weeks? The truth is, Layne didn't want to be saved. He'd been offered help countless times. His bandmates tried. His friends tried. His family tried. But Layne had made peace with his fate. He once said in an interview that he knew the drugs were killing him, and he was okay with it. He said he'd rather die than live without them. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. Layne Staley's death is one of the saddest stories in rock history, not just because of how he died, but because of how alone he was when it happened. The man who once sang to sold-out arenas, who had millions of fans around the world, who had one of the most recognizable voices in music, died on a couch in a locked apartment, and nobody even knew he was gone. His body sat there for 2 weeks, decomposing in front of a television that nobody turned off, while the world outside moved on without him. If this story moved you, make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And if you want to hear more tragic stories from rock history, check out the video on the screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.